topic of safety in our families is one of the most incredibly difficult things. There's virtually no other topic that causes people some feeling deep inside that says, I think I'm busy tonight. The ability to overcome that, to come out to a talk like this and to say we're going to face this head on is tremendous. And I give each and every one of you that's here credit. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll be able to share with maybe the rest of the parent body that it wasn't as scary as we thought it might be, and that there are actually some pretty straightforward, simple, and logical things you can do to really keep your children safe. Just as a brief introduction to who I am, I'm a licensed school and clinical psychologist in private practice. I'm the chairman of the clinical advisory board of McGay New York. And just very briefly, McGay New York is an organization started here in Queens by Mrs. Cyril Goldfinger and Mrs. Aviva Hack. And I was brought on board on the clinical side of it. And we went looking to try to face the issue of safety of our children. And we went looking for a program, a curriculum. What can we bring to all the yeshivas that can be palatable to every yeshiva in Queens across the spectrum to really help our kids be safe? We found that the best program available to the Orthodox world was the one developed by Debbie Fox in the Aleinu Foundation, which has now been, her program has been moved over to Magen Yiladim International. And we all share a common name of Magen and Shield, Protect. And we've done this in all the other yeshivas in Queens, as well as some other programming. So, in addition to that, we do some internet preparedness training and things like that, and something for you to know. I'll give the contact information for the organization. There are plenty of other things that we try to help the schools out and the general public here in the neighborhood with. What's my goal? My goal is very simple. To help you see both the need to address abuse, to motivate you to do that, and to show you that it can be done in a very manageable, non-scary kind of way. And we don't want to be dramatic or create fear, but at the same time we want you to know the severity of the issue and then ways of dealing with it. Is there a set time that I have? Because I have to tweak this enormously, where I just go until they walk out. All right, you give me the cue. It's crucial to know that it's not, the point is not to get every single word that I say the way that I say it. It's to get a feeling as to what the kinds of things we do to educate kids are, so that you can go home and actually implement it in your house, not quoting what Dr. Zimmerman has said. So, before we get into the actual model, we need to know that this safety is our responsibility. We're going to talk about what we teach the children, but fundamentally we can't rely on kids to protect themselves, especially against a sick individual who's trying to do something terrible to them and who's older, manipulative, wise, usually charismatic. We need to do a lot of achrayus taking on our side. But before we talk about the specifics, there is no substitute for the parent-child relationship. I can talk to you about techniques and things to say and scripts to say and what to look out for, how to look out for. If your child doesn't have a solid relationship with you, if they don't feel comfortable talking to you, if they don't feel safe in their home, if they don't feel internally safe and secure, that they have a solid place in this world, that they have a sense of self-esteem, self-worth, they are incredibly vulnerable to be taken advantage of by others. When they have that solid core internally, and they have that solid foundation around them in their environment, at their home, in their yeshiva, they are much less vulnerable to abuse. And that's really, we can then layer on this information, but there's no substitute for the relationship. Those kids with the solid relationship, they are less impacted by stressors, they make for terrible victims, and they're more resilient. Even chas v'shalom, something does happen to them, they bounce back much easier. I'm not using my laptop, and for some reason this stopped everything sync. Okay. A lot of technical difficulties tonight. Program is not responding. Okay. is? Oh, he's not even here. Did we get that? Okay, let's just. Okay. So obviously I have no idea what's going on with the computer and the technical stuff tonight. The way this was developed was through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, one of the most internationally recognized agencies of dealing with this, working together with our cultural sensitivity to the Orthodox population and the community itself, leading to practical solutions. Just so you have a sense, well over 20,000 yeshiva students have received this education and their families. So one of the questions that's really always posed, whether people ask it explicitly or not, is, can this really happen in our community? Yeah, it's happening, it's in the media, it's by the Catholic Church, it's by the Hasidim, it's by the... Does it happen to us? And unfortunately, just out of my practice and my clinical consultation, both from Again and being on the board of an organization that deals with this called Amudim as well, I can sit here for a week, literally, and just go on with stories. I will touch on just a couple that happened with people in Queens. So, a kollel fellow / Rebbe would go to the mikveh with teenage boys and ask them to videotape themselves when being motzi zera in order to help them deal with this issue. Later, when a person attempted to get this individual out of chinuch, that person was called a rodef, a murderer for trying to destroy this individual and his family. A staff member in a camp ripped a 10-year-old's pajamas with a metal object and proceeded to molest him. This is in a police record. Subsequently, that individual was allowed to be in a yeshiva dorm with high school students. A young child, in my practice, from somebody you probably bump into on the street regularly, was at a Yom Tov meal with their family. While the family was enjoying the Yom Tov meal, two of the young cousins were upstairs touching each other in highly inappropriate ways, highly sexualized manner. A bunch of boys in the yeshiva play games in the bathroom that go well beyond the exploration curiosity games where somebody is introduced to something very adult is playing that out. These are all from local institutions in our community right here. So the unfortunate answer is yes, it happens in our community, and we shouldn't be ashamed of it because it happens in every single community in the world. Why we're here is so that it stops or we minimize its happening. This is something that's been going on, though Rabbi Lamb talked about this being the new Gullus challenge. We have some documentation, both in the rabbinical literature as well as historical documentation. This has been a problem that exists as long as we know it. And if you really ask yourselves the question, how many of you have a story to tell, or know a friend, a relative, most of you will know, either through your own experience or through somebody who you know pretty well, that there's stories. What I'm going to show you next is actually a parent video. And all these individuals, a principal, pediatrician, a psychologist, detective, are on there. Just so you have a sense, Dr. Nagel, who's the religious pediatrician in California, will show how he educates young children in his practice. He will use the word penis as calling the boys by its proper name. That is something that the research shows is critically important, that kids who know the names of their body parts are less likely to be abused. This was done on purpose. Reb Shmuel Kamenetsky saw this video 2 times and approved it and said that the public needs to see it in this manner. So I just want you to know that up front. And again, one of the things we run into often is that children don't have the language or the conceptualization to know how to deal with this while it's happening, before it's happening, or even to report to us when it happens. This is a very large video file. I hope it'll run off this jump drive. Every single event I've been at to present this has had technical difficulties, but this one takes the cake. Okay, I think we're going to have to... try one more time with this. No. Okay. So in that situation, what I'm going to have to run through for you is encapsulate this video. We will touch on almost all the elements in the video, but basically what we go through is, so let me back up and show you who's who. The principal from Los Angeles, they actually formed the Rabbinic Advisory Board there and are very involved. And the principal talks directly about his experience dealing with cases both in the yeshiva as well as a recognized person in the community. And the need to address this, both at the home level and the school level and the camp level. So this really, we try to get this education across the board, and that's his main emphasis. The pediatrician, which is something that's critically important, what we encourage pediatricians to do is at the yearly visit, when they're usually, whenever it's scheduled, we teach them to go through the body parts with the child, and before they do the thorough physical exam, explain to the child that this is something that only they, the doctor, with the parent's permission can do. And the parent, when checking for if something's wrong or helping very young children go to the bathroom. But outside of that, nobody else is allowed to touch your private parts. Dr. Nagel will name the private parts, and he does this very casually in his office. You see the boy lying on the table. He gives him a directive that this is what he's about to do. He gets a big high five from the boy with permission beforehand. And he goes and he does the education. It's completely nonchalant, very simple, but also very powerful. Actually, in Lakewood, the Shkir of Montesil Salmon encouraged that the pediatricians do some of the education directly to the students. So at their yearly visit, they are told that if anyone just tried to touch you, basically scream your head off, which is something that we teach, and this is their main directive over there for a number of years. And one time there was, in shul, the parents were upstairs praying, and all there is screaming coming out of the basement. And people rush down and find this boy, and disclose that somebody was trying to touch him. They said, where did you know to do that? And he just answered very simply, Dr. So-and-so, my doctor, just told me that's what you do. Kids are very concrete. We get very confused about a lot of things because we have higher levels of thinking, but especially the younger kids, if we teach them a simple, clear rule that can be transferred to many different situations, they will abide by that. Dr. Pelkowitz, the psychologist, goes through many of the steps that we really cover in detail. The detective for the juvenile sex crimes unit in Queens, in Los Angeles, we work with the people in Queens, will talk from a very police-oriented perspective of the need for supervision, the need for active involvement. His line is, don't try to be your child's best friend. Try to be their parent. That the sense sometimes by backing off and not knowing where our kids are, who they're playing with, what's going on with them, we relinquish the responsibility. Now we have to counterbalance that with kids' need for independence and healthy development, but he has that's his main message. Somebody then goes on to illustrate a Shabbos guest story where this individual came to town and people started taking him in, and he noticed some odd behavior. This was a person trying to abuse children in the home of where he would go for Shabbos, and this person was a completely just a community member, lay person, had no knowledge of this whatsoever. Just by being aware that things were a bit odd and pursuing it, he was able to prevent this from really becoming a communal tragedy. In terms of summer camp, we've moved, actually, Debbie, myself, and other mental health professionals. Debbie spearheaded a program that we put together, a training for camps where they videotaped myself and a number of the other mental health professionals with different modules like bullying, molestation, and general difficult camp issues. And the camps that sign on to have the guidelines will also have all their camp staff watch these videos, take a sort of exam on it with the help of a mental health professional so that they really know what they're doing and the appropriate boundaries and responses before camp. And something that we see across the board is that when parents are proactive, so if you ask, hey, to your camp, what do you have? What's the policy? What's the procedure? That goes a long way when there are a number of voices who are looking for this. When it isn't, camps, yeshivas, all organizations are extremely busy with many things. But when they see that it's important to their clientele, it makes for huge change. So, questions, you have general safety rules throughout your home. Are you able to see the graphics from here? So if you see like there's a child chewing on a cord, baby in the bath, car seats, what do you do with medicine bottles, how they walk, how they cross the street, matches. There are countless things that we do for safety, which are just naturally parts of raising any child. And that's what we want this to be, not this big, scary boogeyman, just a natural part of child safety. And we also, how many of you have halachic rules in your home? Well, kids wearing tzitzit, yarmulke, what do they look at on the internet? Kashrut, keep it out end, turning lights on. Right? There are countless halachic rules that are put in place. And similarly, the rules of tzniut and how we behave and what's appropriate and not appropriate in terms of showing our bodies is something that, again, we want to incorporate with the rest of the halachic rules that we have in the home. Then you go again to the rules of personal safety, and this is what we want to include. The idea that there's no secrets, and I try to help parents make a distinction between a secret and a surprise. A surprise is something that everyone's going to know about, just not right now. So if daddy's trying to plan a surprise party for mommy and tells the kids, listen, we're making a surprise party for mommy, don't tell her that we have the cake. On Sunday, we're going to do the party. That's a surprise. A secret is something that children are not allowed to tell ever. And we teach the kids that nobody is ever allowed to tell you to keep a secret from your mommy or daddy ever. And the second somebody tells you to keep a secret from your mommy and daddy, that's exactly when you know you have to go home immediately and tell your mommy and daddy what they said. Because nobody's allowed to do that. Again, the general message is also that you can say no. We'll get into this in detail, that kids have a right to say no, especially when it comes to their bodies. We believe it takes a community to create a safe environment for a child, but it also takes a community to allow abuse. When we ignore things, when we have lapses, when we feel, oh, okay, this person's out of our synagogue, that's where abuse flourishes. When we band together, across the community wide, it doesn't matter how it works, that's when we're much more secure. And that's why I'm actually really glad that we're here tonight, because we're making now official, I think now we covered every single yeshiva, almost, we're getting there still. So that's really when we know our entire community is banding together to keep our kids safe. So what's the model? This might be a little hard to see. On the school end, we need active leadership, both within the school and throughout the community connections, prioritizing child safety, clear conduct and policies. Those come with this program. They develop some policies, and there are more advanced policies that we can help get for the school. On the parent end, we need awareness and prevention through education, advocacy within the school. So again, most schools want their parent body happy. And if you show something you want and you're willing to invest time and effort to get something there, almost every school we've ever been involved with will go along as long as people are willing to help them with it. And open communication with the school. In terms of the children, we need them to know their ABCs of safety. I'll demonstrate that all the way at the end. Practical, easy to follow tips about inappropriate touch, relationships, and situations. Research shows us that these prevention efforts are most effective when we have all the components and when it's not a one-time thing. Most people, it's like hard enough that they did this event and it's like, okay, I checked this, my kid got safety kit in school, check, I'm done. It's when it's incorporated into daily life that it's effective. Actually, if you leave it at the one-shot deal, very, very, very poor efficacy on being able to keep your kids safe. So like I said, we can't rely on the kids, but what I want you to know in terms of the rules, in terms of your discussions, you really can't mess this up. Parents are terrified. How am I going to say this? How am I going to bring this up? Kids do not panic or become fearful unless their parent is freaking out. So you get yourself calm, relaxed, do this in a very casual manner, your kids will be fine. Worst comes to worst, you give them a little too much information, and just like it blows over their head and they go back to playing with Lego. It's very, very little. We get very anxious as parents. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Am I opening up a whole Pandora's box? Almost all those concerns are really just our own adult stuff being put on the kids. The kids really do fine with this. But also how we convey, from an emotional standpoint, how we feel about child safety and our sense of security and the ability to prevent this and our ability to help our kids say no and stand up really is the crucial thing, rather than the exact words we say. So we're going to talk about the rules, and we'll get into this in detail, so I'm not going to go through this. Also, you might not see much happening when you have the conversations. You might be like, all right, kid moved on, nothing going on. But what we see is a latent effect. That means later on, we see this come out, that many kids, thankfully, they're not in that situation, but when they're all of a sudden put in this situation, and they heard a number of times, nobody's allowed to touch you, nobody's allowed to tell you to keep a secret, even if they threaten you, you come tell mommy, daddy, then, chas v'shalom, when something happens, it kicks into gear. So we don't expect all of a sudden a light bulb to go off in the kid's head and say, oh, thank you, Mom, I'm safe and secure. So don't get worried that, okay, I did nothing here. There's a tremendous effect. So the question that always comes up is, who might abuse kids? And our natural gut instincts as people is we want to be safe in the world. So we really want to be able to tell who's dangerous, right? And I'm a trained psychologist. I deal with this all day. My ability to predict who is a perpetrator by seeing them, by interacting with them, is zero. Okay? Absolutely zero. They come in all sizes and flavors, and we have no idea. What we do is give you universal precautions, how we deal with every person. The same thing that happened in the medical field, they don't ask beforehand, is this person likely to have a disease? Not. They just put on gloves. They handle their syringes in a certain way. That's what happened in the medical field many years ago, when they realized that we have no way of knowing who's carrying what. We use universal precautions, and that's what we do in terms of safety. But just so you have a sense, because the media portrays this one way, the hardest thing for us to grapple with is that incest, abuse within the family, is the most common form of abuse, both in the secular world and in the Orthodox one. In fact, a survey from within the Orthodox population bears that out. I'll quote you something from Dr. Pelkowitz's book. He says, intrafamiliar perpetrators were the single greatest source of unwanted sexual contact. This raises the uncomfortable reality that in the Orthodox community, it's within the expected safety of the family that the danger of sexual abuse is most likely. You're going to hear about the crazy guy who walked on the street, or they're going to bash the rabbis. Actually, the greatest percentage of abuse by far occurs in the home. So we need to be mindful of that. And it can be anybody, parents that their grandchild, aunt or uncle, brothers, sisters, or cousins, family, friends, or neighbors, anybody with access to kids, and it can be religious leaders, camp counselors, etc. Abusers are really good at targeting vulnerable kids, and we're going to get more into that in a moment. So the biggest myth in child sexual abuse is that kids are abused by strangers. And for years there was something called stranger danger, and basically, I'll spare you the details for the sake of time, stranger danger is the wrong message. Kids don't understand it, parents don't follow it. How many of you walk up to somebody in the store, where do I get that? You talk to strangers all the time. All right? So we're telling our kids, don't talk to strangers, and all day we're modeling talking to strangers. And who's a stranger? The guy's in my synagogue, I see him. My dad said hello to him. Is he not a stranger anymore? I saw him walking down Main Street. So the message is totally confusing and the wrong message. The message we have to give is the general safety messages we're going to provide you with. So over 90% of abusers are known well by the kids they abuse. So how do molesters do this? This is kind of a creepy thing to have to think about, but a powerful one. We have a very hard time with this whole concept in general because thankfully most healthy people cannot figure out what on earth is going on in the mind of somebody who wants to molest a child. So we shut it down entirely. But if you think for a moment without getting gory, if you were to try to get a child to do something like this and want to have to seclude them, get them to not tell, get them to be close to you so you could do this, what would you have to do? And the main thing is called grooming. And that's basically designed specifically, how do I get this child slowly over time to come under my clutches? So what is the basic process of grooming? They target a child. Now, this is crucial, as sick as it may be. If you want to be a good molester, that's a molester who doesn't get caught. What do you need to do? You need to pick your victim well. Any good molester is exceptionally good at this task. They can pick out a kid with issues quicker than most psychologists I know. They just have a sense of who the kid is that's a bit vulnerable, either needs attention, families having issues, there's strife, parents are more preoccupied, nobody's really going to believe them, there's an illness in the family, there's divorce, there's stress, unemployment, something is stress in the family, they might even look for somebody to come involved and help out. Boom, they prey on the targeted child. And actually children with learning disabilities and other kind of emotional disabilities get abused at rates incredible, 4 or 5 times those of other children. Then they need to gain the child's trust. So you become part of the family, you become friendly. The good ones are incredibly charismatic and very talented at gaining children's trust and gaining the family's trust. They feel a need. They step in and they have this like parent-like relationship. And they become really befriended by both the child and often the family. So everyone's guard is down. And again, because we have such a hard time imagining this from the first place, especially once we know this person, I see them and they're so religious and they're so kind and they're so nice. No way. I wish that were true. It's not a protection. You can be extraordinarily kind, extraordinarily religious, you can be anything. And you can have a disease that causes you to act in this manner. Then they isolate the child, develop that special relationship, and pull them. And then the child's in a conflict. On some level, they want this person in their lives, feels good, and they want away from this person because something feels really confusing and bad inside. And that already makes the child feel even more different than everybody else, and actually more likely to just keep going with this because they have no idea what to do. Then they sexualize the relationship. They introduce touches. Most times in the media we're going to hear the kid got accosted all of a sudden. That is the 1% case. Most of the cases, they slowly develop, they push the boundaries, they started with a little gentle hug, a kiss, and moved into more and more sexual kinds of behavior. And then they maintain control, and the use of secrecy, fear of being blamed for the kids are terrified, and they have this special relationship they don't want to let go. Also, if you think about it for a second, again, it's so difficult for us to do, but unfortunately I deal with this in my practice all the time. If the molester sees that he's losing his hold on this situation, it takes one sentence. I have a gun, or I have a knife, and if you say anything to anybody, I'll kill you and your family. It's one throwaway line for a molester. It's one traumatizing thing for a kid. It makes it very, very difficult for them to get out of that. So what do the perpetrators tell us? They actually say to us, parents are really naive. They're worried about the stranger. They should be worried about their brother-in-law. They just don't realize how devious we can be. This is a quote from a molester. I used to abuse children in the same room with their parents, and they couldn't see it or didn't seem to know what was happening. I was disabled and spent months grooming the parents so that they would tell their children to help me out with my disability. No one thought a disabled person could do this. Heavy sighs coming from the audience. It's going to get better. This is the hard part. Okay, and I need to do this because we need to understand what we're facing. And they tell us parents are partly to blame because they don't inform their kids about any sexual matters, and I use that to my advantage. I'll be the one to teach them. And they tell us, molesters tell us, don't be embarrassed to talk to your kids. It's harder to abuse or trick a child who knows what you're up to. I'll spare you some of the local events of this. So what do? Okay? As a parent, we need to be aware and pay attention. Who is in our kids' lives? What's their relationship? Ask questions about where your child is, who they're with. Teach your child adults should play with adults, kids should play with kids. When we start to have these relationships get very blurry, we often have a red flag on our hands that we need to investigate. Also, we need to tell our kids up front that anything they ever share with us about touching or social relationships or relationships they're uncomfortable with or concerned about, you're just going to praise them. And they need to know that you will trust them, that they will never get punished, you'll believe them, and you'll do everything you can to help them. So babysitting. Again, something we barely think about. But an issue both in terms of general safety and just very quickly, just some local stories. One babysitter took had to go to a doctor's appointment and really wanted to shower before she got her exam. So 2 toddlers were running around the house when mommy came home, and the babysitter was upstairs in the shower. Parents come back from their evening, and daddy goes back on the computer, and babysitter had logged in and was watching hardcore pornography the entire time. And then another incident here where come home and find out that through kind of the kids telling some fuzzy story that the babysitter had a boyfriend over the entire time and they were doing inappropriate things, not watching the kids. So aside from just actual molestation, there are many other ways that this can be inappropriate and something we need to deal with. So give specific instructions to them, both to the babysitter and to your kids, about what you expect in terms of their conduct, how they're going to act, what time is bedtime, is there homework, is there bath, is there shower. Be specific. And what are your rules and expectations? Is the babysitter supposed to do discipline? What happens in an emergency? We want to give them a sense. And you have to remember, a lot of these babysitters are kids themselves, and they don't know sometimes these very practical issues. And then check in with your children about their experience. How did they feel? Were they comfortable? What happened? Make sure you have a comfortable vibe. If you start to keep getting, parents have to learn to trust their instincts more. Many times you say, nothing, you'd be overreacting. Too many times I've heard the parents say, I knew, I felt it. Especially the moms in my practice. So many times they've come to me that they had this instinct. They know their kids better than anybody else, and they had the instinct. Don't be scared to act on your instincts. You're the parents. Okay? In emergency information, and I don't know if we actually have this material, but to develop emergency preparedness, the kids have their numbers. If they have allergies or medical concerns, who do they contact? Emergency number. And just so you see down here, this is an actual ad. Many times, people just post to KGH Schools or something like that, ads looking for a babysitter. Now, in some way that's very efficient. In some way it's also very efficient for somebody who wants to do things inappropriately because kind of open to anybody. So we want to do a little bit more due diligence before we just take anybody into our home. Play dates, I'm always asked about this. One of the crucial things about this education, sometimes you can get the reaction, okay, that's it, my kid is staying home with me, no more world. Okay, that is a recipe for an incredibly unhealthy kid as well. And one of the counterbalances to this education is kids need to be normal. They need to have play dates. They need to go to camp. Because I'm doing this kind of crash course style, they need an incredible amount of positive, healthy touch. So we're going to at least started limiting touch amongst teachers, amongst counselors, and things like that for this safety. But we have a trade-off now, where a lot of adults are, whoa, I don't do that with the kids. So, some of my biggest referral sources tell me in 10 years from now, we're going to be referring to all the kids who are unhealthy because they have no emotional affection in their life. So you as parents need to do double duty with that emotional and physical affection that they might not be getting the way they used to. In terms of play dates, do you know the family? Who's there? Do you have their names, phone numbers, address? check in with your kids. What games do they play? Who was there? Who came in and out? Who was watching them? What kinds of things happened? Very casually. Again, it's more about being involved and the kid getting a sense they can talk to you about anything than anything else. And again, ask casually, did the friend's house have different rules or different customs than was by your home? So, supervision. This is probably the crucial one. Okay. Again, I touched on this before, but actually the fastest growing rate of abuse is child on child. This is true in the secular world, and unfortunately, based on the limited data we do have in the Orthodox world, this is exceptionally true, higher than the secular world. We're unclear if it's because we have large families, less supervision, a lot of close familial ties, but we have kids doing inappropriate things with kids at an extraordinarily high rate. Up to 1/3 of offenses in the secular world occur at the hands of other children. And siblings, brother incest is to be at least 5 times higher than parent-child. Supervise, supervise, supervise. Be involved in your children's relationships. Develop a trusting and open relationship with your child. We'll touch a little bit more closely. What can we do at home? So what are the rules of personal safety, even at home? Who's allowed in your room? Are doors allowed to be locked in your own playdates? Absolutely not. There needs to be an ability. Our biggest protection is transparency, and things are open. So when we all have a sense that somebody can just walk in, when there's free flow of people who see and know what's going on, that's the biggest safeguard we have. Same thing at home. We don't want kids behind closed doors, especially with doors locked, with multiple kids. Children of all ages should be supervised even while they're at home. Doors open, siblings, cousins, other family members, or visitors, same thing. Create a safety family rules around bathing and dressing times. Do they bathe together? Who's allowed in the bathroom? Do you change in the bathroom, under your covers? We need to have, and it grows with different ages obviously, we need to be sensitive to this because this can stimulate kids in an unhealthy fashion. And random checks, so the easiest way to do this is really just a shift in mindset. Most of us as parents, we're exhausted. We're listening to speeches at 10 after 9 in the evening. We have better things to do. And by the time we're dealing with our kids, especially on Shabbat, the holidays, anything like that, the moment we get quiet and the kids are downstairs, that's the first time you get a sigh of relief instead of, oh my gosh, what's going to be here? Whew, quiet. And that's exactly the time when trouble's happening. So, I don't want to disrupt your quiet time, but I want you to just create a pattern where you and your husband go and take a peek every so often, randomly. And if I remember, I'll look at my wife, we'll go downstairs, just pick up in the middle of the meal, walk downstairs, hey everybody, how's everything going? Or we just take a peek downstairs, just to sense people are coming in and out. We don't want to do this every 3 minutes on a schedule. Again, you'll create an intensely neurotic home. But to have a culture where people are coming in and out, so that's the safest thing we can do. Playing doctor. Kids play doctor. This can be a very normative thing. Children are naturally curious. And it's not just limited to playing doctor. All sorts of bodily exploration they do with each other, especially when they're young. When it's mutual. When there's 2 kids having fun, exploring each other, that's normative. When there starts use of power, coercion, uncomfortable feelings, that's a flag. Okay? One kid should not be victimizing another. There should be no oral or genital contact with the mouth or penetration. If you come across suspicious play, the hardest thing is try to remain calm. And I know this is incredibly difficult. And ask simple questions. What game were you playing? Who else do you play this game with? How do you play the game? Where'd you learn the game? And you see if you just find anything, if it's just natural curiosity, we just use the safety rules. And if something's more, you're going to get a consultation about how you deal with that. And use that innocence as how to discuss their bodies, answer questions, talk about these safety rules, where and when it's appropriate to be undressed. And we want the kids to have a sense without feeling shamed or guilty for doing this normal thing, but we want them to follow the safety rules. So conversation with your child. The key points. Your body belongs to you, and everybody has to respect that. Okay? Or the flip side of that is you can always say no. Okay? So your body belongs to you. No one has a right to tickle you or touch you in a way you don't like. And similarly, children should not have to sit on someone's lap or give hugs and kisses when they don't want to, even to aunts, uncles, or grandparents, which can be very hard for us. But what happens is if we force kids to do things that are uncomfortable with their body, we're really telling them you're not in control. You must give that up. And now when somebody else does it for a totally different kind of reason, that's a negative message. And sometimes we could just do it very casually, like, he's not in a hugging mood today, maybe a high five, or next time. Or usually if we respect the kid, they actually become more comfortable doing this. And sometimes there's a sense that they're just very uncomfortable doing this. Even if anyone, even at home, wants to touch, look at, or talk about private areas of your body, or wants you to look at, touch, or talk about their bodies, I want you to tell me immediately. You can say no anytime you're uncomfortable, no matter who it is, even if it's an adult, a teacher, a family member, a brother, a sister, a cousin, or friend. I am your parent. I will believe and protect you no matter what happens. When it happened, or who it happened with. Some of the difficult conversation can be around, just so parents know that when children do this to one another, this can be extraordinarily serious. Even if because kids sometimes, unfortunately, usually if we find the trail, somebody's been exposed to something inappropriate, but it can happen in the schools immediately after Pesach. I get to my office, I have a message waiting for me. Dr. Zimmerman, you must see this kid immediately. The kid is 12 years old, he's thrown out of his school pending him seeing you. Some sort of touching happened. Now this kid's life is very, very disrupted. He has no school to go to. We don't know what's going to happen. We have a very intense supervision plan that has to be put in place for him to be back in school. And there can even be, it can rise to the level of criminality. But it really can be disruptive to both kids' lives. And something we just have to take very seriously without, again, making this intense. And a lot of this really, when you have these kind of questions, is when don't handle this on your own. Call for a consult to a professional organization, put you in touch with somebody. Going to the mikvah, again, we cover all sorts of schools. Really should be a father-son discussion, basic information. We want them to know this is a holy place, a private place. Even though you are going to be undressed, it's specific to here. We do want to help, and just so you have a sense, even kids are going to be going to camp soon, where also many camps will have kids undressing in a certain level of public. To whatever degree you can help your kid learn to change somewhat privately, under their towel, under their robe, even if there's no location for them to do that, is helpful. And again, the same type of education that this is something appropriate, let's say, for pre-swimming or in the mikvah, but nowhere else, and nobody else is allowed to ask you to show or touch or do anything. And it's also not a place for joking around and having fun. It's to do what you got to do and get to swimming, the mikvah, etc. And also for the parents who go to the mikvah with their kids to demonstrate how do you behave appropriately, how do you change appropriately, how do you do what you need to do in the right way and nothing else. Camp safety. Camp is a huge situation, whether it's day or sleepaway camp, because the kids are much more rambunctious, less structured. The less structured times are where all these kinds of issues happen, both in schools and camps everywhere else. Again, ask your camp counselors in advance. Are the staffs alone with campers? Who's supervising them? Is there training for them? Is there a policy? What happens? Can campers communicate with their parents if they're uncomfortable? What happens if the kid's uncomfortable? When will the parents be told? And you'd be shocked that some of these things, like obviously if something happens to my kid, they're going to call me 3 minutes after that. No, not necessarily. And certainly not if no one in the parent body ever asked them to do anything about it. So you might not want to be the lead, but take you and 3 of your friends and make a meeting, and you will have a radically different camp experience. Okay, so before camp, what kind of discussions? We want to talk about the camp atmosphere. So we want to talk about pranks and bullying. Okay, I'm going to super speed this. Hurting, embarrassing, no means no. Who can they talk to if they're feeling unsafe? Share your experiences. Your life experience is very valuable to your kids, both in terms of camp and other things. Talk to them about what happens to you and things that you experience. That's the biggest modeling and biggest rationale they have for how to deal with the world. Safety in this shul, a very similar thing. We think we're going, we're praying, the kids are somewhere else, we're fine and relaxed, the kids are not in our hair, the kids are totally unsupervised. You have to know where the kids are, and there should be basic policies of where do they go, can they go privately, with whom. Many kids have been abused in pirches, in schools, in these kind of groups, because everybody's asleep at the wheel. Okay, let's try to find some of the more crucial things. Don't offload this to people like myself or the Safety Kids educators, because nobody's going to educate your children better than you. So take the time to do that. And do it by, again, don't raise anxiety or fear. Give the sense that we can talk about anything. Okay, one of the best games and friendly ways to do this is the what if game. So, what if you couldn't find me at the park on a Chol Hamoed trip? You were walking home and a man asked you how to find Main Street. What do? And we teach kids that adults shouldn't be asking children for directions, and don't respond. A friend or even a brother or sister wants to play a touching game. You do this very casually. This should not be a string of 5 what-ifs that I'm giving to you, but casually here, there, and everywhere. When you're about to go on a trip, every time I go to a new amusement park or a large store, it's an opportunity. Who are the safe helpers there? Police, firemen, the cashier. How do you know the cashier? Uniform or tag. Who's always a safe helper? A mommy with kids. How do you know they're a mommy with kids? Oh, they have a little baby with them. Is anyone allowed to take you? Say, come here, I will help you find them. No, we teach kids a grown-up's phone number, a cell phone number, and they're taught to stay put. And please dial my mommy or daddy. In places where we know there's a kind of lost child place, so we show them that that's the one place they could take them. Instead of, oh, come to the parking lot with me, we'll look for your parents over there. They're never allowed to leave the location with either a cashier or anybody else. No, I have to stay here. Please try to bring my mommy here. Again, anybody tells you a secret, that's something you immediately tell mommy. When there's an opportunity, your kid's upset, their sibling walked into them on the bathroom, you feel icky. Share that with your kid and talk about what you did to get yourself back to a comfortable place. Bedtime, before bedtime or during a meal, you can just ask, how was your day? Anything make you uncomfortable? What was a good part of your day? What was some difficult parts of your day? Casual conversation. One of the things I like to do in my practice, and this is helpful for abuse prevention, bullying, and anything, is we want to teach kids to say no. We want to role play with them. And I stand up, I'm about 6'3" or so, and I stand up with these little kids in my practice, and I make them look up to me in the eyes. And I want you to tell me, whether it's for bullying or anybody else, and look me in the face and say, Dr. Zimmerman, I don't want you to do that. Please stop. Whether that's anything that they'll do. Right? And even with kids, we teach them that if somebody's picking on you, bullying, making fun of you, you can look them in the face, stand up tall. Even if you're feeling really scared inside, I want you to stand up tall, look them in the eyes, and say to them, I don't like when you do that. Please stop. With touching, we tell them if anybody tries, then you yell and run, scream, and make a scene is what we tell them. And get out of there and keep screaming until adults help you. I teach them the most powerful thing. They all want to do karate chops and ninjas and this and that and the other thing. And I explain to them, you are so strong, but you know what you can do with your mouth? If you scream really loud, you can get 10 people. And that's stronger. So we always want them to know that there is a safety in them calling out for help. Okay, warning signs of abuse very briefly. Basically, what I want you to not walk away with is, oh my gosh, my kid said something on the list, my kid's abused. No, these are very generic. They can be about many, many different things. In general, for mental health, what we look for is what we call change in baseline. If your kid has a significant shift that doesn't last a day or two from how they were, whether that be in their sleep habits, eating habits, mood, bedwetting, soiling, anything like that, we want to look into that. That doesn't mean they were abused, but it's something we want to pay attention to. Also, extremes, good or bad. All of a sudden the kids' grades start plummeting, or they start acting perfectionistically. They're doing perfect, they cry when they get a 98. Might be nothing to do with abuse, might be some other thing, but things we want to look out for. Especially if there are specific fears of all of a sudden a person or a place, we want to take that very seriously. How much time? Not much. Okay. Children don't tell for many reasons, mostly because they don't believe anyone's going to believe them. They're afraid, they still love the person. What happens if you have a disclosure? Disclosures don't come, I have something to tell you, somebody touched me. They have all these unclear ways of telling. The major thing is to stay calm. Tell them that you will believe them. Do not promise them things, oh, we're going to kill them unless they'll never touch you again. Don't promise things you can't come through with, and most of the time you can't carry that through. Explain to them we will protect you and do everything in our power to keep you safe, and I'm so glad you told me. Just give them the support and then get help from somebody who does this professionally. Okay. Just so you have a sense, this is quite heavy. When we go into the kids is very colorful, bright, friendly. The preschool kids, it's with puppets. The kids from 1st through 4th grade, it's with actual kids, young kids from the Los Angeles area. And just so you have a sense, just very briefly, these are what the materials look like for the kids. I usually show 2 of the little video samples of the videos that your kids see. And basically we go through A, B, C, and D. A is ask for help. So in general, how do you ask for help if you're lost, if you're anything that you need? B is bring a friend. Kids are always safer with a friend. C is check first. So anytime you're making a plan or changing a plan, where you're going, oh, all of a sudden so-and-so saw me on the way home from school. I was supposed to be walking and they offered me a ride. Somebody needs to call your grown-up, mommy, daddy, or whoever's supervising you, anytime there's a change of plan. And D is do tell. So if anybody ever does something that makes you uncomfortable, you can always tell me. And what we do is explicitly, even if somebody tells you not to tell her that they'll do something terrible to you or anybody else, something really bad will happen, the safest thing for you to do is always tell your mommy and daddy no matter what they say. So we just preempt it explicitly. Okay. Let me see if this works at all. No. Okay. So what I'll do is, and just very quickly, just so you see, these are the different cards. This is for the preschool. This is for the 1st through 4th grade, and the kids get very specific information. And maybe what I'll do, because we didn't have time to go through these thoroughly, is maybe I'll email you a hand that I have that's not from Safety Kid. That's like 5 condensed pages of exact things parents can say, and you can just disseminate that so that people have something more concrete. Okay, this is our local organization. If you need help with anything, so I'm just going to open up the floor to questions. I don't know if do they have cards if they want. If you have a piece of paper there, if you want to ask them anonymously.
There's some water.
Thank you. Please, anybody who's comfortable asking a question from the floor. Yeah, go ahead.
How early would you suggest about wearing issues?
About what issues?
About safety issues?
So this is a question I get every time I speak, and the answer is, what age do you start talking about safety issues? And the real answer is from birth, right? Because what is really happening when we say no hot, it's a safety issue. When kids are old enough, when they're toddlers, running outside without their shoes, right? Who are they allowed to go with, right? Do you take candy from strangers? So what we want to shift is, the easiest thing that happens is that abuse is put out as a whole different category. And our whole job is to just put it into practice with everything else. So when somebody knocks on the door, maybe to collect tzedakah at night. So I do, okay, one of my kids in the Yael, check first. Who's at the door? If it's a name that we've approved beforehand, the grandmother, right, mother, father, then she's allowed to open the door, not the younger ones, right? Very simple things. So what we want to do is apply what they learned in school, the ABC. So when you're doing something, can they pick up the phone? Can they answer? We only want older kids to pick up the phone who are able to not say, yeah, nobody's here, or mommy's away, because that's what perpetrators do. Sometimes they make calls to figure out if our kid's supervised or not. So we do this at the youngest ages, but what we do is we increase the level very gradually to meet where the kid is. Our goal is not to under-inform. Oftentimes parents have a hard time actually giving the information because they're very uncomfortable themselves. So we want you to get comfortable with the information. We also don't want to give these long explanations about the birds and the bees when the kid asks you like a simple question of what's happening with the baby in mommy's tummy. So we want to ask a few questions of the child to get a sense of what are they really looking for without not answering them, and then answer them very directly. Anybody else?
Also, how often would you talk to your child about this safety issues?
Okay, so this occupational hazard of being a psychologist kid, all the books in your house are about all these emotions and safety and weird things. So, my wife makes sure to put in some regular material. So we can't overdo it. But the way to not overdo it is when it becomes a very normal part of education. So when it's exactly like I said, when it's not a sit down, when it's somebody came to the door, check first. When it's whenever we go on a trip to a new place, it's who can say daddy's phone number the fastest? And it's a race. So the kids aren't getting a safety lecture, but they're getting a safety lecture. Right? We go in, okay, who spots the first safe helper? And, right? So it's not, I very, 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 very rarely want you to have a sit-down meeting with a child and give them this information. Your job is to figure out creative ways of just incorporating it in, and then it can be done very regularly as life happens. And when they're going to camp, that's a new discussion. That calls for a little bit more information. When they're in a new situation, a new setting, more information, but the main thing is, and there's a thing, especially if we use it with the play that's, oh, he punched me. He punched me there, he kicked me there. Remember, nobody's ever allowed to touch you in a way that makes you uncomfortable. Thanks for telling me. We're going to put a stop to it. So we just threw it in a very casual way, so kids don't feel like we're constantly lecturing them about this and we're creating anxiety about this, but we're actually giving them a wholesome review very frequently of ways to really keep them safe. Does that make sense? Anybody else? Yes?
How can you detect if any adult is doing anything to your child? Someone who's either a relative, a friend, teachers, or anyone who's around the child.
So the question was, how can you detect if anyone's doing anything to your child? The only really quite foolproof way is when the children give us some indication. But often they don't come up and tell us. So what we do is, a lot of what we're talking about is prevention, supervision. But again, we notice based on symptoms. All of a sudden the kid's uncomfortable with that person. They really love that person. Now they say, no, I don't want to go to their house anymore. Most of them, come on, we're going, it's Uncle so-and-so. Pause for a moment and think. It might be nothing. Uncle so-and-so might not have given them a Laffy Taffy last time they were there. Or it might be something very natural. So I don't want you to abuse, because again, that will be incredibly unhealthy. But at the same time, I want you to listen to the kids and see, and then ask. Why not? And if the kid starts to show that they're really uncomfortable, this wasn't just, oh, last time he was, look further. Don't jump to conclusions. We have to be rational and reasonable with these things, but the main thing is to be aware. And then when kids show signs, we very gently ask very global questions. What's going on? This seems to be bothering you. Or young kids get a lot of physical symptoms. When we have a lot of physical symptoms going on, we don't know what to make of it. Then you call in for a consult. So there's no specific litmus test that says, boom, this is it. It actually is very subtle. But if we're careful and we're sensitive to what's going on with the kids, and we allow them the space to tell us, and we've supervised them, and we have a pulse, what's happening, change from baseline, are they all of a sudden more afraid, more uncomfortable, they're more promiscuous, they're more hiding their clothes, they're afraid of this, to go to this person, or they all of a sudden really, really want to always hang out with this person, to the exclusion of other people. Both extremes, right? These people work by slowly breaking boundaries. And so you want to read about okay, is this just normal behavior? Are the adults playing too much with the kids? What's happening? What's the level of interest?
Just in the initial anecdotes that you gave about people who were exposed as being abusers, and yet they were somehow given permission to continue to have exposure to children.
Yes.
So how does that happen? Why does that, how can you explain that?
Rabbis always have to ask the most difficult questions. To explain that, the honest answer is I don't have a full explanation for that. What I can tell you is some of the most complicated stuff that I encounter. Because some of the most well-meaning, well-intentioned, smartest people, leaders of the community, on the secular side, on the rabbinic side, have been involved in protecting. What is the rationale for that? We don't have any good answers. What I can tell you from doing a lot of consultation with institutions, and even being involved in this many times in some direct way, Chas v'shalom, somebody says, one of your staff, Rebbe you've been working with for years, you know him, he's a great guy, stellar person, great with the kids, loves the kids. It's your brother. It's your father. You gonna believe it? You believe some child says, isn't it? It's very easy to believe when it's over there. The moment it comes close, our biases, our psyche shuts it down. And we know that in Bezdin especially, right, just hearing somebody's testimony before the other person comes in the door, you have to chuck the case because it can bias the opinion of the greatest rabbis, not of this era, but of the greatest rabbis in our history. The subtlest things. So one of the things we do often in terms of our consultation, what I always want to do, even whether it's happening in your family, in your school, in your camp, kick it outside. Not to your board, not to your mother or your sister, but kick it to somebody who's not involved in the situation at all and has experience with this, and then better outcomes happen. But we are getting much better at this. But this is a problem with the human condition. I can tell you this is happening right now, and legally we have a very specific problem. I know of a molester in Kew Garden Hills right now. He has multiple accusations against him. However, not one single person is willing to go and testify either to the district attorney or to the police. What then happens is that for us to spread this person's name publicly is defamation. You can get sued, and you can get accused of how you're ruining somebody's life. Where's the evidence? And sometimes that has happened, where people have been accused falsely, and they can jeopardize their life and career. So there are legal and ramifications, but we need a tremendous amount of both the people on the ground as well as the leadership to work together to make it very, very much okay, very much needed. And the only way we can deal is to help people go forward so that we can do what's necessary. We have made relationships with the district attorney, with the police department, with the special victims unit. Those connections are not used because we're not going to them because of this reason. And now on the flip side, because you asked as the rabbi and the leader of this school and somebody who has tremendous influence in the community, the most difficult question I'm often asked in my practice these days is, can you promise me, Dr. Zimmerman, that it is better for my child? The other children, God is going to have to worry about. Can you promise me that for my child, it is better if I go forward to the authorities? And I, and none of the colleagues I've consulted with, the leaders in the field, have been able to say a resounding yes, because there have been cases where somebody firebombed the person's car the next day, or their lives have been threatened, and their premise has been threatened. So until we really make a cultural shift where it is absolutely, we're going to protect and encourage, and the rabbis and the chairman of the board are going to walk the child into the precinct, which we've done here, actually in Queens. We've helped create that happen. Until that happens more frequently and more often, we're not going to be able to do a lot of things, and we're going to have our kids in very, very serious danger. But everything we're doing here, at least, we're never going to get rid of every perpetrator. They've been existing, again, since the beginning of time, and we have no evidence that they're going to stop existing. We need to do our due diligence to take as many of them off the streets and get them as much help and in a proper way, in safeguards, not sending them to the next community, the next shul, the next school, to do what we have to do, and we have to be careful and supervise our children. Anybody have papers, questions that way? Can you just ask them up to me? Are they written out?
You would just email.
Oh, okay. No, so we usually send around for an anonymous question.
There's a question?
Huh?
I have a question.
Yes,
Maybe it was answered, but maybe I missed it.
that's fine.
Let's say the parents detect something. For sure, 100% this happened. What do the parents do first? Who should the parents call first?
So the question's a bit different. The question was, let's say the parents detect something 100%. Who should the parents call? Now, it's incredibly rare for the 100% to be true. Most of the time, unless you walked in on something, it's not 100% unclear. What happened, some story, some symptom. And oftentimes when it's unclear, you want to get the help of a professional who deals specifically with this to process. Because what happens is, the natural instinct is for parents to all of a sudden become police, and they start questioning the children. And when you ask certain types of questions to children in a certain emotional way, they actually answer falsely. And it can actually create false memories and all sorts of problems. So we need a lot of guidance in terms of how to question the kids. If you actually see something, then there's the reporting hotline that you can call to report this, and they will help get you specialized people involved to deal with this situation immediately. Just see this. Just if you want to know, the public hotline is 800-342-3720, and anybody can call, and you can even make an anonymous report if you see something else going on or you really suspect. You can go that way for reporters, mandated reporters in the school. That's the second one. So there, but many times parents are really confused and calling, a local organization who deals with this directly, or a professional can help you kind of sort this through till we figure out if what's happening. But any suspected reports can go to the hotline direct. Anything else? Okay, so then we'll close our shop for tonight.
Some cake, some cookies, some coffee. It's not too late. Thank you very much, Dr. Zimmerman. It's just the beginning, and hopefully we won't have to deal with these things on a personal level. Thank you. Will be available, somebody will be.
Yeah.
If somebody has any questions, what I'm Dr. Zimmerman, he'll be here dismantling the computer stuff.
That's increasing a little bit our force. Yeah, like here you can make something, you can, right, not just probably, you can after the initial accusation without anonymity and just accusing a blog of somebody did this to me. places when people have a bad debt up. So often if somebody people want to get back or invest in custody, someone wants to use it. Those are the places we see much higher rates of full segregation because there's internal cases whatever, you just can't figure out what's true, what's false, what's this. I mean, I would want to practice. The guy wanted $1 million for a get, and the mother accused him of protecting the child. So, right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Once it's true, it's can if we have an emotion run high, and who knows?
save it now.
we have to know.
Okay, thank you. Good night. Okay, good night.
I'm only one of the mentors of some work in lyrics and the training. I wrote